So we're going to open up to questions now. We're going to look at Slido, and we're also going to have questions in the room if you're feeling brave. I'd like to invite all of our speakers to come up and join the main stage. And do we still have Miriam? Great. Hi, Miriam. So think of your questions in the room as well, because we can also have roaming mics. Welcome back to the stage, everybody. Let's see. So, okay, top voted question. What are the trade-offs you make when choosing digital deliberation versus physical? What do you lose when you gain efficiency? I might direct that one to the delib team if you're feeling up for it.
That's a good question. Is this on? Oh, it is. Well, I don't think that you should necessarily choose, particularly between one or the other. I don't think you need to be kind of digital determinist. You should be using the mechanisms that work best for the audience that you're trying to address. So there will probably physical and in-person events that accompany online, maybe larger scale exercises. Miriam was talking about it actually in her talk. So there are loads of different ways you can do it, but I think it should be a mixture. And it really depends on the topic that you're working on, depends on who your audience are. But yeah, I don't think you have to trade off between one or the other. I think it's a bit of both.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And then it changed around. Miriam, I had a question for you from Slido, which is there any guarantee the local authority will implement the recommendations? And I guess, how do you think about that?
It's probably the most important question there is, because you could do the best deliberation, the best engagement in all the world, and if the commissioning body doesn't take any notice of it, it's worse than not having done it in the first place. It's like, if trust is kind of low now, if you kind of people put their time and energy into like taking part in something and then nothing happens, well, just people feel massively even more disillusioned than they were before. With the two councils that we're working with on Waves, I'm really confident. That is why we picked them. We asked them for their commitment up front to, at the very least, you have to publicly respond to what comes out of this process. It's all going to be done openly, transparently. It's in public. We want to make as much noise about this as possible so everybody knows and is aware of it. So it's really in your interest to respond and ideally take forward the recommendations and actually implement them. They have everybody at the minimum is committed to responding to them, and we are really confident they are actually going to be listening to the results, because we chose them because they want to hear, because they're putting forward these incredibly difficult, knotty topics where they don't really know what to do around housing and planning. That is going to be very difficult and controversial, but they're prepared to do it, which gives me a lot of faith that you can't really back out of taking forward this decision if the whole thing is done very openly and transparently. So yeah, I'm confident. Going forward, are the people taking this on and commissioning work and then not following through? Yeah, it's possible. It's happened many times before. I've been aware of enough deliberations where not enough happens as a result, but I'm really hopeful, because I'm an optimist, that the dangers of not listening are worse than making a decision that might look harder kind of in the short term for an authority. So I would very much hope they will take it forward.
Thank you for that. That's a great answer. And I think we all struggle with that. Love a binding mechanism when it's possible, and it's not always possible. I think it's why participatory budgeting maybe strikes a lot of people as something very clear cut, right? The money is there and you get to spend the money. All right, one more from Slido, then we're turning to in the room. And top voted question for Miriam and Colin: how is your work funded? Maybe Colin first?
Yeah, absolutely. As a 501c3 nonprofit, every dollar we bring in is listed online openly. So I'm happy to say that we've had funding from Brian Acton, who funded Signal, for instance. Gratefully acknowledge funding from other private offices like his and family offices that have funded this. Acknowledge funding from Google.org, and I would say that we have always worked with governments. And I would say if you're thinking about the funding in this space, governments usually from infrastructural projects, they'll fund things that are staff heavy that are specific to their locale, and I think that citizens' assemblies are in that kind of, they're visible, and I think that you've seen governments do seven figures in that. Usually for the tech side, for some transparency, since you're asking about funding, we'll see like a 10K tech fee bumped out for stuff like us. Doesn't come close to covering even the cost of involvement, never mind research and development. The only organizations that have funded research and development have been private offices in tech that have seen the future of that, and private companies. We think that should change. We think this is public's benefiting. There's multiple governments that have national instances. If that's not proof of concept, then I'm not sure where we would be needing to demonstrate impact. But I think that it's time for the governments to come in with, I think, 9 and 10 figure and 11 figure investment in the overall deliberative democratic technology space, and that means like buying Twitter, things like that.
Nice. Miriam, would you like to field that?
For sure. Yep. Waves is funded by google.org. We were one of the winners of the 15 million euro Strengthening Democracy in Europe grant fund that they put out last year.
Congratulations on that. And thanks google.org for funding 2 of the 3 projects on stage at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you want to?
No.
Okay. Revenue from customers, yeah. Great. Would anyone in the room like to voice their question with their voice? Great. Myth.
Hi, my name is Dane Gambrell. I'm a researcher at the Governance Lab at Northeastern University in the US. I had a question for the Delib team. So I appreciated in your presentation how you really focused on the concrete outcomes from the consultation, how they were used to inform decision making. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about why you think that was so successful. So what did Delib, or what did the government agencies do right in their design that allowed the outcomes to be useful? And then sort of the counterpoint, are there instances where Delib was sort of not the right solution, where the input from the consultations did not really inform decision making, and if so, why would that have been the case? Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's a really good question. It is kind of the underpinning of all the work, really. So, I'll start with the end of the question, I think, if that's okay. So where things don't work so well, I think it's kind of unrelated almost to whichever platform you use. If an organisation is just going to take a policy paper, stick it online, and say consultation, that is not going to work. It's so dense, it's so bureaucratic and wordy. It takes a lot of people's effort just to understand the terminology inside it. It's not fair, and it's not the way to do things. And so the organisations that do it well, and we get to see the ones we work with, but there are so many others as well. What they're doing is they're focusing on the audience first. So who are their respondents? What are they trying to achieve? How can they make it as easy as possible for people to take part? And that goes back to the first question that was asked, which is, is an online mechanism the right one? I think if you're trying to get mass scale and to try to reach a lot of people, yes, in combination with physical face-to-face. Really what they want to do as a culture in an organisation is to build trust with citizens. And if they start with that, then they generally do a good job. They consider, can we deliver this information in multiple ways that would work for our audience? So the Scottish Government we spoke about, but they just consistently do a really good job of this. They'll use SoundCloud recordings, they'll do sign language videos, they'll do loads of different things that really go to the audience. And I think that's where it really works. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else in the room? Louise? Myth? I got you next, Louise.
Sure. Oh, sorry, was there somebody else?
Please, go ahead.
Okay. Elisa from the MIT Governance Lab. Just a question for Colin. I was super excited to see the new model and, look forward to looking at it more. And it's especially cool to see, the references and everything's there beautifully. So I was wondering if you could just take us under the hood a little bit to talk a little bit more about specifically how you're looking at representation in the middle. This is obviously something we really struggle with, and what does it mean to have an amalgamated comment of what most people think and how that deals with the tails of the distribution and things like that. So specifically, could you talk us through some of the choices that were made? And yeah, that'd be awesome. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. So the way that I understood the question is about, it's a very core question about the nature of the algorithms and the nature of the output and representation. What the trade-offs might be, what might be lost. I think it's important to say at the outset, if we're looking at tens of thousands of participants and hundreds of thousands of statements, any representation of that will be a compression, right? And we can think about principal components analysis when PCA and k-means that Polis is always used as a compression, right? Looking at the biggest differences in the conversation, and then using those to identify clusters. And so we've always had a trade-off that there were going to be niche groups and specialized groups and that were going to be missed in that, but there was a rigorous and repeatable way to say that, and I would say that we're still building on that foundation, which is to say the clusters of people are still the largest differences in the conversation. The next bit we would say is, okay, if we were going to then represent what those groups and how they voted on everything. Groups are identified by how they voted on everything, so the largest differences in the conversations. We could even think about that more as like an emergent political compass, so to speak, would be the right mental model there. So you're creating the largest differences and then creating the clusters. I think it's very important to get ultimately down into some of the finer grained groups of people. Just to switch to some of what you saw today, of course, then we need to get down to certain topics. And so, giving people control over, giving people a manner more control over where they are in the conversation, seeing, participating, is also giving people the opportunity to weight what they think is important. To date, we haven't allowed any input whatsoever from population members in a survey population to influence what statements they were seeing next. At the scale of 10 million, where someone chooses to vote and how they access where they choose to vote actually becomes an important signal of what they feel is important, what they feel they're an expert in, and that's extra signal that we can pick up back into clustering. And so I think that's a really specific answer on both axes of people and on comments, but I think that it's also very encouraging early signals that is going to work.
And unfortunately, we have to stop there because it's lunchtime. Should we do one more quick one? Are you okay getting to your sandwich a minute late? All right, Louise, maybe for the final question, and then you can pester these guys at lunch too.
Thank you. As a related question to Elisa's, really to Colin. So you've moved from a mathematical model where the language in Polis 1 was supplied by people themselves, and now you're using AI to summarize in a paragraph. What's been your experience? And you've got sort of international ambition, you want the global kind of hub. What's been your experience of the differences in performance in different languages? Because that's going to be based on what is available to train the systems in different languages.
It's a great question. We can only proceed in deploying these technologies where they can be deployed safely. Language is a specific barrier to that. I think that the demand for intelligence, in computational intelligence, however we want to frame what's happened and the specific technological advancement that's been made, it is my belief that will be kind of pulled out, right? The value, the thing that we can count on capitalism to do is to get to the, is to get there. It may take a long time, and it may take public infrastructure, and it may take different open models to get there. We are already running large language models in the cloud. We are already working with different large language models and open source large language models and running them for certain topics. In fact, the topics that you saw there in the map were actually generated privately. The summary still requires a very large model. The largest possible model actually is the most responsible thing to do, both on a language and just the computational complexity of the task. However, choosing a topic is already something that we can peel off and own, and we already have. And so I think that we anticipate running lots of different models for lots of different use cases, and also because it's open source, and every line of everything up there is also open source already. We expect that as people adapt it to a local environment, that task is parallelized both in the development of the models and the integration of them into the system.
Can we get a round of applause for all of our speakers? And now let's have lunch. Thank you.